Ever met someone who moves through the world like a machine built for precision? That's the intj, short for introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging. The so-called masterminds of Myers-Briggs MBTI world. They're like emotionless robots, perfectly capable of suppressing feeling, even manipulating when needed, just to keep their blueprint intact. Cold, sharp, always on track. But then there's the Zeta. Picture a lone wolf, the darker, more aggressive shadow of the Sigma. A figure who doesn't just reject the system but bends and breaks it for sport. They don't only manipulate to survive, they sometimes manipulate to watch the fire burn. They break systems for fun. If the intj is the architect of order, the Zeta is the devil of disruption. This video of 10 chapters traces where they overlap and where they split apart. Both rare, both outliers, both obsessed with independence. Yet one builds carefully inside the system, while the other prowls outside, clawing at its walls. Together they are two faces of solitude, one robotic and calculated, the other primal and untamed. And somewhere in their contrast, you'll find the reflection of your own edge. Chapter 1: The Outliers. Have you ever felt like a ghost in the machine, present but not truly a part of the world around you? This is the shared ground where the intj and the Zeta first draw breath. They are the outliers, the observers stationed at the periphery of the human carnival. Both are rare, introverted by nature, their minds turned inward in a constant, silent dialogue. They are the watchers from the shadows, collecting data on a society they instinctively feel disconnected from. But the Zeta carries a second face, one that mirrors the intj itself and other one that smiles like a devil. The intj archetype, born from the clinical language of Myers-Briggs, presents this as a function of cognition, a systematic processing of the external world. It is generalized scientific in its isolation. But the Zeta, a creature forged in the fires of internet culture, means raw customized human psychology, wears a mask. One face is that of the intj's cold calculatedness, the calm, calculating intellectual. The other is something far more primal, a detached, almost predatory awareness that the philosopher Nietzsche might recognize as the will to power turned inward. For the Zeta, this duality is not a choice. It is an instinct. You don't just observe the system. You see through it, understanding that most of its rules are written on sand. While the intj might study the blueprint of the maze, the Zeta already knows the walls are an illusion. This is your first nature, to see the two faces of everything, especially your own reflection. Chapter 2: Science Meets Shadow. Do you know the difference between being understood and being categorized? The intj emerges from the sanitized halls of psychological research, a product of Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs' attempt to map the human psyche. But the Zeta? The Zeta was born in the social underground, in forums where men stripped away pretense and spoke about power, isolation, and the brutal mechanics of human nature. Where Myers-Briggs offers the gentle fiction that all personality types are equally valuable, the internet's harsh laboratories revealed something darker. They discovered that some men don't just think differently, they operate from a completely different moral framework. The intj might use strategic thinking to climb corporate ladders. The Zeta uses it to decide which ladders are worth acknowledging. The Zeta is a creature of threads, subcultures, and blunt observation. This is not a clinic-born idea, it is practical psychology made visible. Heuristics learned from survival in social markets, from watching what actually works. Nietzsche's will to power hums under it. This is less classification, more a living tactic. They speak different languages. One offers classification, the other offers practice. intj inherits a blueprint, Zeta invents a rule while breaking the old ones. mbti can flatten nuance, Zeta can dissolve into contrarian nihilism. Robert Greene understood this when he wrote about power's amoral nature. The Zeta doesn't reject morality because he's evil. He rejects conventional morality because he sees how it's weaponized by those who never intended to follow it themselves. This is your origin story. Not born from textbooks, but from the raw observation of how power actually moves through the world. Chapter 3: Independence as Religion. What happens when you realize that most people's opinions are just borrowed thoughts they've never examined? Both the intj and the Zeta worship at the altar of independence. They share a fundamental rejection of herd mentality, an almost allergic reaction to groupthink, but their motivations reveal the chasm between them. The intj seeks independence as a tool for efficiency. He rejects the crowd because crowds make poor decisions, and poor decisions interfere with his carefully constructed plans. His independence is strategic, calculated. He needs space to think, to process, to build his mental models of how the world should work. The Zeta's independence runs deeper, more instinctual. You don't reject the herd just because it's inefficient. You reject it because following others feels like a violation of your core nature. And also slow. While the intj asks, how can I use this system better? You're already asking, why should this system exist at all? Marcus Aurelius wrote that we suffer more in imagination than reality. But for the Zeta, the suffering comes from watching others live in imaginary prisons they've convinced themselves are necessary. You see people celebrating their chains, calling them traditions, values, and social responsibilities. This isn't about being contrarian for its own sake. It's about having a psychological immune system that automatically rejects external programming. Where others seek validation, you seek authenticity. Where they crave belonging, you demand autonomy. Your independence isn't just a preference. It's a survival mechanism in a world designed to domesticate wild minds. Chapter 4: Strategy or Drift. Do you map the future in neat boxes, or do you trust a compass and move until a path appears? Which voice in you prefers a blueprint, and which one laughs and walks anyway? Do you map your conquests on a spreadsheet, or do you feel the path in your blood? He plans like an architect. He drafts a future in ink before the ground is broken. He values telescope time, contingencies, and leverage. He studies chessboards and builds ladders inside systems. Sun Tzu whispers that supreme excellence lies in breaking the enemy's plans, yet he believes the bound plan is the engine of victory. Strategy for him is a scalpel, clean, precise, cold. You move like weather, you start the fire and learn the shape of the room as the heat rises. For Zetas, the problem is irrelevant, because the act itself breeds the solution. Zetas do this instinctively. Improvisation is not lack, it is a trained muscle, a refusal to be owned by someone else's timetable. Nietzsche nods at the will to power. You take the world as material, you test and bend it while you go. Both ways can kill you. He can become a cold mastermind who forgets to live. They can become a ghost on the map, irrelevant through motion without consequence. Learn to carry a small map and a sharp knife. Plan enough to protect momentum, move enough to manufacture advantage. Marcus Aurelius would call that focus on what you control. Make it your law. Chapter 5: Player versus Abstainer. What's the difference between using people and refusing to play with them at all? Social dynamics reveal the clearest distinction between these two archetypes. The intj, for all his introversion, still operates within social systems. He might prefer smaller circles, carefully chosen alliances, strategic networking. He understands that even the most brilliant minds need leverage points in the human world. The intj treats society like a complex machine. He studies its mechanisms, identifies the pressure points, and applies force where it will yield maximum results. He might despise small talk, but he recognizes its utility. He might find office politics tedious, but he navigates them when necessary. The Zeta takes a fundamentally different approach. You don't navigate social systems. You opt out of them entirely. While the intj asks, how can I use this network? You're asking, why should I pretend this network matters? Seneca wrote about the importance of choosing your companions wisely. But the Zeta has taken this philosophy to its logical extreme. He's chosen solitude over compromise. You don't reject people because you hate them. You reject the social contracts that come with them. This creates a paradox that most people can't understand. You can be charming, intelligent, even helpful when the moment calls for it, but you refuse to be owned by social expectations. Where others see relationships as investments, you see them as potential liabilities to your autonomy. Your social strategy isn't withdrawal. It's selective engagement on terms that preserve your essential nature. Chapter 6: Strategy versus Detachment. What do you do when the world tries to make you feel something you refuse to carry? What do you do with the fire in your veins? Do you build a furnace or let the wind extinguish it? Do you feel the heat rise and ask yourself whether to refashion it into a tool, or to let it pass like wind? Which move is honest, which is tactical? Emotions are where the intj and the Zeta reveal their most profound difference. Both possess what others might call emotional coldness, but their methods and motivations couldn't be more distinct. The intj approaches emotions like a general approaches battlefield intelligence. He suppresses what doesn't serve the mission, strategizes around what he cannot control, and weaponizes feeling when it advances his goals. His emotional control is deliberate, calculated, a conscious choice to subordinate feeling to thinking. But for the Zeta, emotional detachment isn't a strategy. It's a natural state. You don't suppress anger. You simply don't generate it in the first place. While others rage against unfairness, you've already accepted that fairness is a human invention with no basis in reality. Epictetus taught that we cannot control what happens to us, only how we respond. The intj masters his responses through discipline and planning. The ZETA transcends the need for response entirely. You don't get emotional about things that don't affect your core objectives, and your core objectives exist independent of external validation. This creates something dangerous in you that others sense but cannot name. Your emotional independence becomes a form of psychological warfare. When others try to manipulate you through guilt, anger, or fear, they encounter nothing to grip onto. Your detachment isn't numbness. It's the ultimate freedom from a world that trades in emotional currency you refuse to accept. Chapter 7: The Hierarchy Question. What happens when you realize that every ladder is just another cage? Status and hierarchy expose the fundamental philosophical divide between these archetypes. The intj sees hierarchy as a tool, a system to be understood, exploited, and ultimately mastered. He might despise the petty politics of corporate life, but he recognizes that power flows through established channels. The intj treats hierarchies like any other complex system, something to be analyzed, decoded, and leveraged for his strategic advantage. He might work within corporate structures, academic institutions, or political frameworks, using their rules to achieve his larger objectives. His relationship with authority is tactical, not emotional. But the ZETA operates from a different premise entirely. You don't climb hierarchies. You deny their legitimacy altogether. While the intj asks, how can I rise above the system? You're already asking, what gives this system the right to exist? Nietzsche understood this when he wrote about the transvaluation of all values. The ZETA embodies this principle instinctively. You don't rebel against authority, you simply refuse to recognize it. Your defiance isn't loud or dramatic. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows that all human hierarchies are just consensual hallucinations. This makes you dangerous in ways that traditional rebels never achieve. Rebels validate the system by fighting it. You invalidate it by treating it as irrelevant. Your power comes not from climbing ladders, but from walking away from the entire building. Chapter 8: The Modern Edge. In a world built on networks, what's more powerful, building connections or needing none at all? The modern world reveals each archetype's unique advantages with brutal clarity. The intj thrives as the architect of complexity, the mastermind behind systems that others cannot comprehend. He builds companies, designs frameworks, creates solutions to problems most people didn't know existed. Silicon Valley runs on intj intelligence. But the ZETA possesses something the modern world desperately needs and simultaneously fears: the ability to operate completely independently. While everyone else becomes increasingly dependent on networks, platforms, and social validation, you've cultivated the capacity to function in complete isolation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The ZETA has taken this further. The best response to a corrupt system is to prove it's unnecessary. They rebel against the system, not literally but psychologically. They are the type of guys who thinks twice before sharing any information. They see negative and positive of every new invention. They are the critique society can't run without. This creates a different kind of power in the information age. While others panic about being cancelled, deplatformed, or socially ostracized, you've already built your life around the assumption that external support is temporary at best. Your independence isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Studies in behavioral economics by Daniel Kahneman showed that loss aversion drives most human decision-making. But the ZETA operates from a psychology where there's nothing external to lose. Does it mean they don't own anything? Don't be fooled. Diogenes was a ZETA and also Elon Musk. The difference is their drive and their own philosophy. Your detachment becomes your greatest competitive advantage in a world addicted to dependency. You question everything because you're beholden to nothing. Chapter 9: The Shadow Price. What happens when your greatest strength becomes your most dangerous weakness? Every archetype carries the seeds of its own destruction, and both the intj and the ZETA walk perilously close to their shadow selves. The intj's strategic brilliance can metastasize into something cold and calculating, transforming the architect into a manipulative mastermind who sees people as chess pieces rather than human beings. The intj's fall is dramatic because it's visible. When he becomes too detached from human emotion, too focused on outcomes over ethics, society notices. His manipulations leave traces. His coldness creates enemies. People call him emotionless robots. He can become the villain in people's stories, the calculating antagonist who forgot that strategy without humanity is just sophisticated sociopathy. But the Zeta's shadow is more insidious because it's invisible. Zeta's high on dark triad also manipulates, but they're subtle. Your detachment can evolve into something beyond indifference, a complete disconnection from the human experience itself. While the intj risks becoming a cold mastermind, you risk becoming irrelevant, a ghost so removed from reality that your insights lose all practical value. Jung understood that what we resist persists in our unconscious. The Zeta's ultimate danger isn't corruption, it's disappearance. You can become so detached from human systems that you lose the ability to affect change in any meaningful way. Your independence transforms from strength into isolation, your detachment from wisdom into nihilism. This is the devil's bargain of absolute freedom. When you need nothing from the world, you risk offering nothing to it in return. The question becomes, can you maintain your essential nature without vanishing entirely? Chapter 10: The Mirror's Edge. When you stare into the abyss of human nature, does it matter which darkness stares back? Here we reach the end of our journey through these psychological territories. Both archetypes draw from the well of Stoicism, that ancient philosophy that teaches us to focus on what we can control and release what we cannot. But where the intj applies Stoic principles as tools for strategic advantage, the Zeta embodies them as a natural state of being. The intj reads Marcus Aurelius to become more effective. You live his teachings without needing to study them. Your detachment isn't learned, it's instinctual. The fascinating truth is that both archetypes represent responses to the same fundamental problem. How does an intelligent, independent mind survive in a world built for conformity and mediocrity? The intj chooses to master the game. The Zeta chooses to transcend it entirely. One is a map of the territory. The other is the territory itself. The Myers-Briggs intj offers a scientific lens, a way to categorize a mode of thinking. The Zeta is not a category, it is a lived philosophy, a raw and uncompromising stance toward existence that is executed, not theorized. Perhaps the most profound insight is this: both paths lead to the same destination through different routes. The intj builds systems to achieve freedom. The Zeta achieves freedom by rejecting systems entirely. Both understand that true power comes from independence, but they define independence in fundamentally different ways. Your choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between two different forms of authenticity in an inauthentic world. Thanks for watching. Now we really want to hear your thoughts on this. Please comment down and we will pin the most inspiring one. Now click on the video appearing right side on your screen. We'll be in touch.